Hello world, it's been a while since I've said hello, and I have a lot I want to talk about in the poker world, but before I do, I figured it made sense to introduce you to, if you haven't been following me on Instagram, which is basically all I've been doing is posting pics of, my two new sons, who are adorable, named Rocky and Apollo. What's up, guys? They do kisses and all this kind of stuff. We're potty training them right now. Rocky's the one giving me kisses with the white paws, and this is Apollo going, "Rrr." He's a little bigger, right? But this guy's a little faster. So when they fight, yeah, go get him. Show him what's up. Yeah, you bite his face. Good boys, good boys. So I've been on doggy duty. You guys are cute, huh? What the hell, right? It's like they're not even real. Look at these things. So adorable. Okay, guys, go run away because we have important poker stuff to talk about. All right, so I've been in the game over 20 years now. I'm 43 years old, had my birthday. Won my first bracelet at 23, started playing the tour in the late 90s. And ever since I got into poker, I've been a huge fan of it, and I've always wanted to do what I could to help promote the game, help create prestige around events because it's fun for me. And I thought, well, if this is fun for me, then maybe it's fun for other people. Like the World Series of Poker specifically just meant a lot because it's historical. You think back to 1970 and Johnny Moss, who won the first one. And, it grew into what it did with Moneymaker winning the main event and all this kind of stuff. So, that didn't start as anything. It started in 1970 as this kind of thing where a bunch of gamblers got together and then they voted on who they thought was the best player. Sounds kind of silly, right? Doesn't sound like an event that has a lot of, it's not, cool or anything. But the World Series of Poker had to start somewhere, and it started there. So, Benny Binion at the time threw something together, and look what it became, right? So what I want to talk about in this video is there's a lot of opportunities for people to try to do things to promote the game, and they do, and sometimes they get mocked by the poker community, and I'm not so sure that's the best approach for everybody involved, because I think the more we can do to help promote the game in various different aspects, the better it is for the pros, the recs, and fans alike. So I want to get more specific and talk about some things that I think add to poker in some way or another, and then see if you guys agree or not. One being, drum roll please, the Player of the Year systems, okay? Now, I'm at a stage in my career where I've made a good amount of money, I live a very comfortable life, I don't play for the money, I try to find things to motivate myself to achieve, whether it's goals or whatnot. So the Player of the Year thing actually began in 2004, and I won the very first one. And I won another one in 2013, and it's been something that I thought, this didn't start as anything, it was just something they threw together, but it's fun for me now, right? Also what it does is it creates a narrative. Now, what does it mean exactly, Player of the Year? Nothing, really. It doesn't really mean anything. It's easy to just mock it and be like, well, this is stupid. Okay, I get it, and if it's not something you care about, you can take that line. But a lot of people seem to, in terms of media narratives and something to talk about during the World Series, and anytime that happens, I think that's what we call #GoodForPoker. Next up, the 25K fantasy draft. Now, this is something that I took over from one Howard Lederer, who you may remember from the old days. He did it at his house the first year, and then he obviously was no longer able to host the event for lots of reasons we won't get into. And I took over in around 2011 or so. Now, since that point, I've put money into it. I've lost money every year. I take side bets amongst everybody that wants to. And I can guarantee you, absolutely guarantee you that the numbers for the 10K buy-in events, I would say that 10% plus of the players are playing partly because of the 25K fantasy. I know because I stake probably 5 of them myself, and there's 100 players, right? So a lot of people play fuller schedules. This year, perfect example of that would be a guy like Sean Deeb. He made some side bets on the 25K fantasy draft. He picked himself on the team, so he played a lot more events. It's also something that creates a lot of buzz at the table. People can talk about. There's something to follow. What does it all mean in the end? Nothing. All right, the next thing is the all-time money list, right? This is something that Remco, he knows it off. He's got all these stats. He's the biggest all-time money leader nerd that we know. Remco also happens to be essentially now I would say the foremost leading authority in terms of poker media. He's got his hands in everything. He's doing podcasts for Poker Central. He's all over the place, doing a little this, doing a little that, and he cites it on a regular basis. Now, I'm number 1 on the all-time money list, and I ask myself, so when people ask, what does it mean? And I'm going to give you a straight answer. Nothing. It means absolutely nothing. All it means is that throughout my career, I've happened to amass the most money. Does that mean I'm the best player? Does it have any sort of tie to that? No. Is it kind of silly if people associate that with it? Sure. But in the end, it's another thing that we can look at as far as poker media and fans and say, wow, interesting to see Fedor Holtz at just 22 or 23 years old already at number 7. Will he catch him? Eric Seidel's on the heels. This is fun, and that's what I would call hashtag good for poker. All right, next up, we've got the Global Poker League, okay? I didn't partake in the Global Poker League. I didn't play it. I did some commentary for them, just to help out, to hope that the thing succeeds, right? I personally felt like it was a long shot to actually work. They did have a first season, and, you know, I think it's fair to say it did a lot less. It didn't do as good as people would have hoped, right? Now, we could poo-poo the innovation and be like, oh, this is so stupid. But why, right? Why would we take innovators that are trying to do things for the game and poo-poo the thing? If the GPL would have worked in the way that they would have hoped, and you know, there's still possibilities with China and different things, if that were all to come to fruition the way it would, it helps everybody. So why are we pooh-pooing stuff? It didn't cost you anything, right? Other than time, maybe. So I just look at stuff like this, and I'm always a fan, and I'm always rooting for these things to succeed. Now, that's not to say that I was going to bet on it. Like, I didn't obviously play in the GPL in the first season. I'd like to see it flourish. I think it's difficult just to make a league like this. Having said that, if Alex can make it work or other people can make it work, yay poker. Hashtag good for poker. Next up, you know, the GPL did this. They've done this in Europe with PokerStars things. They do like poker awards, right? So, you know, you'll award like best performance of the year. You'll award like best female player or best poker content, right? So they have this nice night to celebrate the players and, you know, celebrate the accomplishments, things like that. And in the end, you know, you get these little trophies. I got a couple. I got 2 of them. But in the end, like, what does it all mean? Nothing. It doesn't mean anything, right? It's silly. It's kind of concocted, whatever. But who cares, man? If it doesn't, like, it doesn't hurt the game in any way. Like, I don't see why you would, like, poo-poo something like that when it is an actual fun opportunity to celebrate the game. And in the end, it's one of those things that I would chalk up to hashtag good for poker. Last but not least, I want to talk about the one that I've been tweeting about for the last 2 weeks, and I've been trying to create some buzz and some prestige around it, and it's only because I think it has potential to be cool. The Super High Roller Bowl is something that started from nothing, really, and was created into this amazing spectacle. It's become a prestigious event, high-end talent, the absolute best commentator in the world, Nick Schulman. I think hands down in the history of poker, we've never had somebody in such a humble way convey the message of how to play like super interesting situations and also be funny and witty. And I hope that with Nick Schulman continues to do that more and more. But that's not the one I want to talk about. What I really want to talk about was the Poker Masters, okay? Poker Masters is going to be a series in September of super high buy-ins, 50,000 buy-ins with a rebuy and 100K at the end. And what's added to it is a purple jacket. Now, I've seen people mocking this and saying it's stupid and why are we ripping off golf and the green jacket? Well, the Masters and the green jacket in golf started somewhere, and it was probably a lot of people thought, well, this may be a little bit silly. But in the end, it's like one of those other things where I hope it becomes something cool. Like, you know, if Fedor Holtz, for example, wins the purple jacket, I hope that he looks at that with pride, or whoever does win it, and say, wow, this is a pretty good accomplishment. In order to win the Poker Masters, you're going to have to do the best over that 5 series of 5 tournaments in terms of total money won. I think it would be a great honor. And the more stuff like this we can look at and say, well, you know, he's a 2-time purple jacket winner. The more prestigious events like this, I think this is just good for the growth of the game in terms of fan interest, right? Because without having people interested in who's doing what and all that kind of stuff, you just lose interest in general. People aren't only interested in watching poker for the poker. They're also interested in the drama, the stories, the people that they root for. I mean, this is part of what golf's allure has always been, you know? You either like Tiger Woods, you like Phil Mickelson, you're rooting for them to win the Masters. How does it affect you? What does it mean to you? Nothing. It doesn't mean anything. When you root for the Golden State Warriors to win the NBA championship or the New England Patriots to win the NFL championship, like when they win, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean? Nothing. All it means is they were just the best during that period of time. But in terms of like any meaning you put on it, that's meaning you put on it yourself. I choose to look at all these things in a positive light and root for as many different sort of like innovations to thrive and flourish. And we got to throw a lot of darts, right? Sometimes you're going to come up with ideas and like, yeah, oh well, didn't work, you know. But other times you come up with something that ends up looking like the World Series of Poker, Super High Roller Bowl, et cetera, et cetera. Another good example is obviously PokerGo. PokerGo and Poker Central are trying to innovate. They're doing more live streaming. They're trying to create more content. They're bringing back Poker After Dark. They've got Uncle Ron, you know, with the freaking wagon and a watermelon and a big camera. Some people might like Uncle Ron and some people may not. Point being is we're innovating, trying different things, and I'm really like happy to see this because really if you think about it, who's filling that space otherwise right now? And a lot of people complain, wow, why do I have to pay for PokerGo? It should be free. I'm like, well, because it's a business, right? It's not a charity. They're trying to do things to create enough value for players, and they do that with a lot of the tournaments they run. Like, for example, the Super High Roller Bowl, rake free, and we all know, as I've said many times, less rake is better. Okay, and last on the list, I want to talk about Poker Night in America. Now, these guys are really trying to innovate by making poker fun again. They've tried different angles, they've tried different things, putting, some controversial characters together, and it created some buzz, both good and bad. And Matt Glantz is somebody who is he is probably the biggest troll I've ever seen ever in terms of Twitter. He loves it. That's his thing. He's just the absolute instigator of controversy and things like that. So he's the right guy to do these kind of things. Now, recently they've come up with a concept called King of the Hill, which it's like $50,000 buy-in. There's going to be 4 players, and they're going to pit off against each other. They already did the draw, so we know the matchups, right? Now, this is an opportunity that could be cool. I think heads-up poker, and I've said this to Matt, not a criticism, just, I hope it works. I feel like heads-up poker is more difficult to make fun and exciting for the viewer, but I hope that they succeed. I'm rooting for them to succeed. And I also think it's cool because we can talk about the matchups, and that's what we're going to do right now. So, we have 2 matches to talk about. The first one being Doug Polk against Phil Hellmuth. And I want to go over sort of what I think the 3 keys to victory would be for each player. And we're going to start with Phil Hellmuth. So now, obviously, Phil Hellmuth prides himself on his ability to make live reads. He uses the term white magic, right? So this is what he relies on to make tough decisions, where he folds some hands and people go, what in the world? Why are you folding ace-king heads up? For 30 big bets. He does some crazy stuff, and he really trusts in his live reads. So he's going to have to find something on Doug early on. One of the ways in which you could do that, I don't know if it's part of the rules or not, is to eliminate sunglasses. Because obviously when you take sunglasses out of it, but Phil wears them too. I'd like to see them banned from these types of show things because I think it's also more interesting for the viewer to see the eyes, because there's always a story to be told around the eyes. So number 1 for Phil, he's going to have to be on point with his live reads. Number 2, and I'm going to say I think this is a big leak in Phil's game, is he's going to have to take some more risks with weaker hands on a shorter stack. Often we see Phil whittle himself down from 20 big blinds down to 12, down to 8, down to 7, and then he's raise folding with 8 big blinds. So there's some technical aspects to his game that he's going to need to button up, because if he doesn't, he'll get run over and he's just going to make too many mathematical mistakes. So white magic, if you will, can only take you so far. He's going to have to work on some of those spots on a shorter stack. I think the third key for victory for Phil Hellmuth is he's going to have to play a stronger post-flop game. Now, one of Phil's strengths is pre-flop, he's re-raising with 9-3 offsuit, 10-4 to pick up the weakness before the flop. But post-flop, he has a tendency to miss some opportunities where he could turn some hands into bluffs, he could run some 3-barrel bluffs and do some different things that I don't know that Doug would expect. So, let's move on to Doug Polk and what his keys to victory would be. So this is an interesting situation where Phil Hellmuth has been playing poker for many more years than Doug. However, Doug has far more experience in this specific format playing heads-up poker. So the number 1 area where he's going to have to take advantage is fundamentally. He's simply technically going to make better decisions, in terms of the math of poker, which Phil likes to call it. This math stuff, which he doesn't think is a thing, but it's a thing. So the 3 things I think Doug Polk has going for him going into this match is the obvious. First and foremost, he's going to be better fundamentally. He's played obviously a lot of hands online against some of the best players in the world, and he's going to know the right math, for lack of a better term, in certain situations where Phil may not have, because Phil, as we mentioned, focuses a lot more on his live reading ability. So that leads us into the second thing, which is the fact that Doug has more experience, right? So, again, despite the fact that Phil Hellmuth has played for a lot more years, Doug has a lot more hands under his belt, and that should be an advantage for him going into this match. The third thing, which I think will be interesting to watch, will be whether or not Doug chooses to play what's more of a GTO strategy or exploitative. Now, for those that don't understand what that means, GTO stands for Game Theory Optimal, which is essentially playing in such a way that your opponents cannot exploit you, right? Whereas exploitative play, you're looking to poke holes in your opponent's mistakes. Now, interestingly enough, I think Doug is the favorite no matter which way he goes. If he plays GTO, he's going to be the favorite. If he goes exploitative, he should be. The question is, which would make him a bigger favorite? And I believe that combining the two is the best way to go. So for the most part, playing a GTO strategy, but with Phil Hellmuth specifically, if you are not exploiting him and his weaknesses in certain situations, then you're not going to be as big a favorite. So it'll be interesting to see if he elects to divert from standard plays that would be seen as normal because it's Phil Hellmuth, or is he just going to play it straight as though he's playing against Liberatis or something like that? And the next matchup is Daniel Cates against Frank Casella. Kind of an odd matchup. Frank Casella, not exactly known for his heads-up prowess. Daniel Cates, on the other hand, very much is. So the first thing I want to talk about with Daniel Cates is if this match were played online, Daniel Cates would be a much bigger favorite. If you've ever played live poker with Daniel Cates, he's often playing like a $300,000 pot and Angry Birds at the same time. He has the ADD thing going on, and when it comes to live tells and things like that, Frank is a little older, a little more experienced. There could be something available to him. Daniel Cates is also an emotional player, but what's interesting about that, like he can get really, really angry. We've seen him like go off. It doesn't actually affect his play. He's very unique in that way. Now, my advice if I were giving Daniel Cates any in this case would be I would avoid squeezing out really small edges. I saw Daniel Cates go broke in the 50K Players Championship this year to one of my horses, Mark Gregorich, in one of the early levels of a no-limit hold'em hand where he had ace-king suited against Mark Gregorich. What do you think Mark Gregorich had? If you asked anybody in the world when it went 6 bets all in pre-flop, what did Mark have? Ha! Aces. Of course, Daniel's going, well, I have blockers, so theoretically it's fine. Yeah, but no, it's not. So I think Daniel would do himself a great service if he is a little more patient and doesn't look to squeeze out every little edge available. And that leads into my last point for Daniel, which would be to adjust to plays that he may not have seen against the types of players that he plays against. So Daniel Cates is normally a guy who's playing at the very highest levels. Frank Casella is going to come at him potentially with a very unorthodox style. So it's going to be important for him early on to make adjustments to these weird plays and not like overplay hands in situations where you should against like a GTO player, and Frank Casella is not one of those types of players. So let's move on now to Frank Casella and what he needs to do to win this match. First and foremost, apply pressure. All right? And what I mean by that is really be aggressive. And there's 2 ways in which I would suggest that he does that. I think he should force Daniel to try to make hands. And by saying that, I'm saying like he should be continuation betting a lot. And when Daniel calls, he should be betting turns a lot. He should do a lot more bluffing and really pushing the envelope and try to make Daniel Cates guess. Lastly, the last tweak I would make for Frank Casella in this specific matchup is I would increase his bet sizes across the board. So if I was coaching Frank Casella, I would say up your raise size pre-flop to 3 to 3.5x, right? Maybe even 4. And then on the flop, betting like 80 to 85% of pots on flop. And what this does is it increases variance, which he's going to need because he's obviously the least experienced of the 2. And it's going to put Daniel Cates in some tough positions where you're going to force him to make hands. So this is like me hyping it up because I think this is something that potentially could be good for poker. I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if this is going to bring in mainstream poker. And what does it mean in the end? Like whoever wins King of the Hill, like what does it actually mean? Nothing. It doesn't mean anything. It's just more content for us to enjoy and for fans and casual, for fans and media to talk about what's happening in the game of poker and hopefully, create some interest around these types of events. All right, changing gears now. I want to talk about the return of the PokerStars Caribbean Adventure. Last year it was the PokerStars Championship Bahamas, and we got a lot of feedback from players on the various spots where Gary Gates, who's just been hired as the new sort of player liaison. And if you don't know Gary Gates, familiarize yourself with him. Find him on Twitter. We'll put his handle right down here. Right, Christian? You're going to do that? Okay, cool. So that's Gary Gates. So if you have any problems, with live events, you just hit up Gary. He's going to be so mad. Now everybody's going to be hitting him up. But Gary Gates, he's done a great job of one specific thing. Bringing players like Jason Wheeler and others who have voiced displeasure or criticisms of different things in the live tours, brought them into a room. I sat in this boardroom. It was like a 3-hour meeting, and they've come up with specific things that they find would improve the live events. And a lot of these things are immediately being implemented. One of the things I wanted to talk about that was exciting for me was specifically Justin Bonomo, Isaac Haxton, Eric Seidel. They were very vocal about this internally, not just with PokerStars, but across the board with all these high rollers. Now, these high rollers, typically, you have like 4 or 5 tables, right? So when you get down to 2 tables, sometimes this thing maybe pays 6 spots, okay, or 7 spots. What we've seen happen, even with a shot clock at Aria, we have a 30-second shot clock, we're seeing stalling, like 5-6 players out of the money. Now, the question is like, should you just stop stalling, right? Like, don't be a jerk. But having said that, it's not right to force players to do something that's against their financial interest for the sake of the game, right? We just have to change the rules. And, hand for hand was created many years ago because of a guy named Oklahoma Johnny Hale. Now, Oklahoma Johnny Hale, he was the first staller in history, right? People called it cheating essentially back then, and there was no such thing as hand for hand, and he would just do that. He was just trying to squeak in the money, and financially, he was doing the right thing. It was frowned upon at that time, but poker's evolved and changed, especially because of online poker, where everyone has a time bank, and stalling has become part of the culture. So it's time to address that, and I spoke with Justin and Isaac Haxton and several other of the high rollers about going round for round earlier. So in the Bahamas, in these events that are 10K or above, when we are 6 out of the money, all remaining tables, which is usually going to be about 2, are going to play 6 hands and stop, right? There's no incentive anymore to stall. Now when you're 5 out of the money, it'll be 5 hands. 4 out of the money, 4 hands, all the way down to hand for hand. And what this does is it frees you up to just play into it. Because what was happening, even with the 30-second shot clock, we'd have a couple people at the other table using the whole 30. So now, Isaac and Eric are looking over there going, this isn't fair. This is just not right. So they do the same thing. So now essentially, we're stalling, you're stalling, we're all stalling, and we're destroying the structure and making it a less enjoyable event for everybody. So this round for round thing is something we're going to implement. It's what the players want, and I'm glad to see the PokerStars is on board with this change because it just makes sense. So in addition to the round for round change, in addition to PokerStars Caribbean Adventure going back to its original name, there are also some other very exciting changes. First and foremost, the buy-in has changed for the main event from $5,000 to $10,000. Now, this isn't to cut out the little guy. Actually, quite the contrary. What this does is a lot of people were complaining about the fact that, for a 5K, all your travel expenses to get to Bahamas, which is not cheap, 5K is not even worth the time. But a 10K for these pros is. What PokerStars is going to do on the back end to make sure that this event is well attended is they're committed to sending 400 qualifiers to this event in various formats, online and whatnot. In addition to that, and this is kind of a big one because it's a very, very big cut, all buy-ins, 10,000 and above, are going to see a max rake of $300 per event. Now, in the 100K, that was a $2,000 rake. In the 50K, I think it was $1,500. There was a $750 rake, as you can see here. So the rake is going from those numbers all the way down to a $300 cap, which is true, I believe, also of rebuys. Also, administrative fees for turbo events, that's also going to be cut in half because there was some complaints about that. Obviously, you're playing in a crapshooting tournament with 15-minute levels, and just having the same rake doesn't make sense. And as I've always said, less rake is better. Speaking of those crapshooting type events with the fast structures, there was a lot of hyper turbos and they did not draw well. So one of the big changes we're going to make is there's going to be less tournaments. I think there was like 100 events on the schedule last year, narrowing that down to about 30. With more events that are going to have structures with like 40-minute levels or more, so you'll get a little more bang for your buck, a little less crapshooty stuff. That should help the numbers across the board in all the side events. All right, and last but not least, near the end of the event, if you played any one of the side events, you have a free entry into a $50,000 free roll tournament. So you got the free roll tournament, you've got the rake decrease for the 10Ks and above, you have the change from 5K to 10K, you've also got the 50% cut in rake for the turbo style events, and overall, I think this just makes a lot of sense. Live events, essentially, if we break it down, have always been essentially a marketing tool, right? A marketing tool to bring more people into poker, to have a vacation, to have a good experience. And, frankly, that started to wane a little bit in terms of there was some, squeezing here going on, and some squeezing here and some pinching. And I'm glad to see that internally the companies changing course on that and just going back to what the events are supposed to be, which is about celebrating the game, having the best parties, having the best, promotions, the best opportunities, the best gift bags. Did I mention that? Gift bags are back and they're going to be good, apparently. Don't hold me to that, okay? Because gift bags are usually crap, but I think these ones will be good. We'll see. All right, so that's the end of my rant, but before, I'm sure a lot of you are going to be asking me about this, right? Who is this? What the heck is this? If you don't know who this logo is, it is from the Chicago Wolves, which is the new farm system of the Las Vegas Golden Knights. I got this when I went out to a game. I knew a guy named Kyle Rossiter, and they put this in the back. Check that out. 10-7, right? 10-7. So I'm super excited about hockey, as you can see. I'll be going to a lot of games, but before all that happens, see you in Barcelona. Plan to do my best to get, 1, 2, 3. We're not going to do the daily vlog during Barcelona, but I'm going to try to, create at least 1 or 2 different things, and you really look to, just keep the channel going. And I hope you guys enjoyed the rant. It's a little different, right? Like my rants now. I don't know. I look back at my old rants, and I was kind of a little asshole when I just really was just kind of a jerk a lot of the time. So we're trying to be less of a jerk, more of a positive, upbeat guy, promoting the game we all love. So until next time, y'all, I'm out.